You're listening to Creepcrafts, and tonight I'm going to tell you about something that lives beneath the Appalachian Mountains. Not in the woods, not in the abandoned shacks, but under the ground, where caves go farther than any map shows and deeper than light can follow. I used to believe the stories about the forest, but the thing that took my cousin didn't come from the trees. It came from the rock itself. When I was 16, I spent the summer with my aunt and uncle in southeastern Kentucky, right along the mountains. Their property backed up to an old cave system. People used to go spelunking there decades ago, but the Park Service fenced it off after multiple disappearances. Locals claimed the caves were alive, but you know how mountain towns get. Every tragedy turns into a ghost story. My cousin Tyler was 18, fearless, wild, and way too curious for his own good. He desperately wanted to explore the caves, even though the entrance was sealed off. He talked about it constantly. He claimed he'd heard something inside the caves one night, like scratching, from the rock. Not animals, not dripping water, but something trying to dig its way out. I thought he was messing with me, until I heard it too. One night in late July, we were hanging out behind the house when the sound started again. A slow, steady scrape coming from the cave entrance behind the fence. Then, a voice. Not loud, not clear, but definitely a man's voice, echoing from inside the cave. It was saying someone's name, not mine, not my cousin's. It was calling my uncle's name. Tyler's eyes went wide, the excited kind of fear. Before I could blink, he grabbed a bolt cutter from the shed and sprinted toward the fence. I yelled at him to stop, but there was no stopping Tyler once curiosity took over. He cut the chain and disappeared inside. I waited outside for 15 minutes, then 30. Then I heard something coming toward the entrance, fast. Feet? Hands? I couldn't tell, but it was scraping the stone as it moved. I panicked and ran back to the house.
My uncle grabbed a shotgun and a flashlight, and we both ran back to the cave entrance. I expected to hear Tyler yelling for help. Instead, we heard laughing. Not happy laughter. Not human laughter. Something trying to imitate what laughter should sound like, and getting it wrong. We stepped inside. The moment the light hit the cave walls, I felt it. The rock wasn't smooth anymore. It was carved with long trenches, like something had been dragging itself through the stone. Then we found something on the floor. A handprint. Not pressed into the dirt, pressed into the rock, as if the stone softened for it. My uncle whispered, "We need to leave, right now." That's when we heard Tyler. But he wasn't calling for help. He was whispering. "Come see. It's beautiful. It's all around us." Then the sound of fingernails dragging through stone, getting closer. My uncle shoved me out of the cave and I ran. He stayed behind to seal the entrance. I don't know everything that happened in those minutes, but I heard one shotgun blast, followed by the sound of something slamming against the rock, and my uncle screaming one word: "Run."
Search teams sealed off the cave permanently. My uncle survived, but his hand was shattered and his shoulder torn, as if something dragged him across rock that had become soft. He never spoke about what he saw in there. But Tyler Tyler was never found. They said the cave system was too dangerous. They assumed he fell through a shaft or drowned in an underground river. But that wasn't the truth. Because 3 nights after the search ended, something happened. Around 2 a.m., when the house was quiet, I heard scratching outside my bedroom window. Not on the glass, not on the wood, on the brick wall. I froze, and then a voice whispered through stone, "Come see me, it's beautiful." Tyler's voice, except too stretched, too wide, like the words were being pushed through a mouth that wasn't shaped right. The scratching moved across the brick, toward the corner of the house, and then down toward the basement. My uncle burst into my room, holding a Bible and a gun. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, shaking, listening. After several minutes, the scratching stopped. He looked at me and said, "Whatever is under these mountains, it learns through sound, through voices, through us. And once the caves take someone, they never leave alone." I moved away a month later, and I've never gone back. Not to that house, not to those caves, not to that part of the Appalachians at all. But one thing keeps me awake at night. Sometimes before a headache, or before a panic attack, or right when I'm falling asleep, I hear faint scratching in the back of my skull, like something trying to reshape the walls inside my mind. And once, just once, I looked in the mirror and swore I saw dust fall from my ear, like tiny fragments of stone. So if you ever hike in the Appalachians, and you come across a cave entrance, and you hear someone calling your name from inside, don't answer. Don't step inside, and don't even touch the rock. Because whatever moves through those caves is still learning its way out.
I want to tell you a story that's been passed around these mountains for a long time. It's about a girl people still whisper about, even now. Her name was Willa Mae Martin. Around here, though, most folks don't call her that. They call her the girl who married a corpse. Willa Mae lived in Clinch Valley, over in eastern Tennessee. She married young, only 17 years old, just like her husband, Alden Martin. It was a shotgun wedding. Willa Mae had gotten pregnant, and back then there wasn't much choice in the matter, not if you wanted to keep your family's name clean. They moved into a small, rough-built house not long after. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, and for a little while things weren't so bad. They were young, hopeful, trying to play house the best they knew how. Then, halfway through the pregnancy, Willa Mae lost the baby. The loss hit hard, but instead of grieving together, Alden turned on her. He said it was her fault, said she hadn't taken care of herself, said she didn't love him enough or God wouldn't have taken their child away. Alden didn't know how to carry that pain, so he drank. And when Alden drank, he became cruel. He beat Willa Mae, not once or twice, but again and again. He tore her down with words when his fists weren't enough. Over time, Willa Mae came to dread the sound of his boots on the porch. The only thing she liked about her husband was his job. Alden worked as an oil driller in Texas, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. For Willa Mae, that meant 2 weeks of peace, followed by 2 weeks of terror. Before leaving for work, Alden told his younger brother Silas Martin to check on his wife from time to time, just to keep an eye on her. Silas did what he was asked. He stopped by about once a month to handle the heavy chores, fixing boards, hauling wood, mending fences. Silas was unmarried, quiet, gentle in a way Alden never was. After a while, Silas noticed the sadness that hung over Willa Mae. the way she never laughed, the way she flinched when voices got loud. He asked her questions, not accusing ones, just honest concern. And when Willa May realized Silas wasn't spying for her husband, she finally broke. She told him everything. About the beatings, the insults, how she felt trapped in a life that didn't feel worth living anymore. Silas listened. He comforted her, and slowly something changed between them. They tried to ignore it. They knew it was wrong. They knew what it could cost them, but loneliness has a way of blurring lines. Eventually, they fell in love. Once they crossed that line, they knew they couldn't keep hiding. Willa May decided she had to leave Alden for good. She waited until Alden went back to Texas for another 2-week stretch. Then she quietly packed her things and planned her escape with Silas. Before leaving, she sat down and wrote Alden a letter. People say she didn't hold back. She told him exactly what kind of man he was, told him she never truly loved him, told him she hoped she'd see him in hell. She even wrote out her plans, how she was leaving with his brother, when she'd go, and where she'd be waiting. She assumed Alden wouldn't be back for 11 days. She was wrong. Willa May grabbed her bags and rode a wagon 12 miles to Bean Station. When she arrived, Silas was already there, but there was a problem. He couldn't collect his final wages until the next day. Once he had that money, they'd have enough to survive until they reached California, where no one knew them. Silas put Willa May up in a cheap hotel and promised to meet her at the train station the next morning. That night, Willa May slept better than she had in years. What she didn't know was that Alden had been sent home early. Work dried up in Texas. He caught an overnight train back to Tennessee, then another to Bean Station, arriving just hours after Willa May did. While she slept upstairs dreaming of a new life, Alden sat in their house reading her letter, every word of it. The next morning, Willa May walked to the platform. She saw a man waiting there, wearing Silas's felt hat and jacket. Relief washed over her until the man turned around. It was Alden. He showed her the gun tucked into her waistband and told her she'd spare her life if she rode with him to Silas's house. He said she needed to apologize, do the right thing. Terrified, she agreed. Alden sent Willa May's bags home with a courier, then pulled her onto his horse. As they approached Silas's place, Willa May realized something was terribly wrong. She tried to jump off. She screamed. She fought. Alden was stronger. He dragged her into the yard and forced her to look. Silas was hanging from the porch beam, dead. Alden told her, "Go, and remember, you did this." Then he turned himself in. He told the sheriff where to find Silas's body, said no one needed to be notified. Silas was orphaned and unmarried. But when deputies went to collect the body, it was gone. So was Willa May. She was never seen again. The next night, a cart appeared outside the sheriff's office. No one saw who brought it. Inside was Silas Martin's body, clean, embalmed, untouched by decay. And, wrapped around one of his cold fingers, was a wedding ring.
I grew up hearing this story from people who lowered their voices halfway through telling it, not because it was old, but because it was real. This is the story of Randall Lee Smith, and if you've spent any time around the Appalachian Trail, there's a good chance you've crossed paths with someone like him and never known it. Randall was raised as an only child in the small town of Pearsburg, Virginia. Folks remembered his mother as a quiet woman, polite, kept to herself. She worked long hours in the laundry room at Giles Memorial Hospital, folding other people's clothes and never saying much about her own life. There was something unusual about Randall's early childhood. For the first few years of his life, his mother dressed him in girls' clothing. No one really knows why. People still speculate, but no one ever got a straight answer. What we do know is that Randall grew up different. By the time he reached school age, other kids described him as a loner.
He didn't fit in. He lied a lot. He told stories about money he didn't have, trips he'd never taken, accomplishments that didn't exist. The lies were so frequent that his classmates gave him a nickname, LR, short for Lying Randall. As a teenager, Randall found his escape in the woods. He walked the Appalachian Trail alone for hours, sometimes all day. The mountains seemed to calm him. The deep forests, the isolation, it suited him. After high school, Randall never settled into a steady job. He bounced between odd jobs across Virginia. Most people would have worried about the instability, but Randall liked it. It gave him freedom. He could disappear when he wanted to, and disappear he did. He'd head into the mountains and vanish for days at a time, living off the trail like it was home. Now, the Appalachian Trail stretches over 2,000 miles from Georgia all the way to Maine. Thousands of hikers walk it every year, chasing peace, silence, and a break from their everyday lives. For many, the trail feels almost sacred. But the mountains don't just hold beauty, they hold violence too. There have been brutal crimes along that trail, murders that shattered the illusion of safety, and long before people talked about true crime, the locals already knew. Somewhere out there, danger walks quietly. In the spring of 1981, two young social workers from Maine, Susan Ramsey and Robert Mountford, set out to hike through Appalachia. They were both 27 years old and were raising money for a mental health charity. Along the trail, they met another hiker. They traveled together for a short while, then split up, but agreed to meet again in Pearsburg for a meal. Susan and Robert never showed up. When they missed the meeting, their hiking friend grew worried and contacted the police. Deputy Sheriff Tom Lawson led the search. He and several other deputies hiked up the trail, questioning anyone they came across. Most hikers hadn't seen the couple, but one group mentioned something strange. They recalled a man and woman speaking with a very odd individual near Wapiti Shelter, a small log structure meant for resting hikers. The deputies headed straight there. By the time they arrived on May 30th, 1981, 11 days had passed since Susan and Robert were last seen. Hope was already fading. Inside the shelter, one deputy noticed something dark on the floorboards. Blood. The deputies spread out. Not far from the shelter, they found a pile of leaves that looked wrong, too deliberate. They kicked them aside and uncovered a sleeping bag. Something heavy was inside. When they cut it open, they found Susan Ramsey. She had been stabbed multiple times and beaten to death. The next day, a tracking dog led deputies to Robert Mountford's body, buried near a tree stump. He'd been shot once in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. Both bodies had been dragged away from the shelter and hidden. Nearby, deputies found Susan's backpack. Inside was a paperback book. They sent it for fingerprint testing. Most of the prints belonged to Susan, but one said didn't. Investigators expected them to belong to Robert. They didn't. They belonged to Randall Lee Smith. Deputies rushed to Randall's home. He wasn't there. They forced their way inside with a warrant, and what they found was disturbing. Bloody clothing, items belonging to the murdered hikers, pornographic material, and hospital instruments altered into crude, unsettling objects. They also found a handwritten note claiming Randall had been kidnapped and was about to be executed. It was written in his own handwriting, a lie. The manhunt began. Days passed, no sign of Randall. Rangers and police searched the Virginia section of the Appalachian Trail. Nothing. Deputy Lawson, exhausted, took his family on a short trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. That's when the call came. A man had been arrested in Myrtle Beach. He claimed he didn't know who he was, said he had amnesia, but his body told a different story. He was covered in insect bites, consistent with someone who'd spent days hiking the trail. The deputies had a plan. They told the man he needed to sign a medical consent form before receiving treatment. When he took the pen, he slowly wrote his name, Randall Lee Smith. He was extradited back to Virginia and charged with first-degree murder. At first, it looked like he'd face the death penalty, but a plea deal was struck, partly because there was no clear motive, and partly because one of the victim's fathers opposed execution. Randall received 30 years. He served 15. In 1996, he walked free. He returned to Petersburg and lived with his mother until she passed away in 2000. After that, Randall became a recluse, but one thing never changed. He still walked the Appalachian Trail. People spotted him talking with hikers who had no idea who he really was. By 2008, Randall was thin, pale, and walked with a limp. Prison had stripped away whatever softness he once had. In March of that year, he packed up a few belongings, grabbed his dog Bo, and walked into the woods. No one reported him missing. 2 months later, on May 6th, 2 fishermen, Scott Johnston and Sean Farmer, were fishing on Brushy Mountain. A middle-aged man approached their campsite, waved, and introduced himself as Ricky Williams. They shared food with him. He told wild stories, NASA work, wealth, beauty queens, lies that rolled off his tongue effortlessly. As night fell, Ricky pulled out a .22 caliber pistol and opened fire. Scott and Sean were both shot multiple times, but managed to escape, barely. They reached a nearby home where help was called. Both men were airlifted to the hospital. That same night, a state trooper spotted a stolen truck. Randall tried to flee, crashed, and was arrested. 3 days later, in jail, Randall Lee Smith died. No signs of foul play. Natural causes, they said. His funeral was quiet, brief. His dog Bo was later adopted into a loving home. And that's where the story ends. No monsters, no curses, just a man who walked the trail. And that's the part that still keeps people awake, because the most terrifying thing about Randall Lee Smith is that he didn't look like a monster at all.